training for self-defense, it's not like your average trip to the range. In my experience, in being in a lot of gun ranges, I found that most people, when they go to gun range, their number one objective seems to be to put as many targets as they can close to a nice grouping as near the bullseye as they can so they can take that picture and put it on Facebook. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It can be a lot of fun and sport to do that kind of thing, but that's not training for self-defense. So when you train for self-defense, I'd have you consider a couple things. One, you need to train a full range of motion. It's not enough to just train shooting. You also have to train drawing the weapon, right? You have to train getting into the grip. You have to train coming up into a stance and coming up on a target. You have to train shooting. You have to train reloading. You have to train potentially putting that gun back in the holster. Those are all things that are part of that range of motion that you have to practice and train so it becomes muscle memory. If all you ever do is train shooting, when you're in a real life-threatening situation, you don't have that muscle memory to be able to draw the weapon and do all those things. So full range of motion. Two, I think we got to concentrate on bigger targets. I think we have to get away from the bullseye mentality of thinking that if I don't group all my shots right here, I'm a bad person, right? I've not done my job. Consider for a minute that I'm a pretty skinny dude, and this is still a pretty large target, right? If you get a shot anywhere on here, it's going to be pretty effective. So you do not need to group shots in the bullseye all the time to be effective. All you got to do is get shots on target. If you're using a silhouette target like this, this particular target, my gray area here is good enough. I do not need to group shots in the bullseye. If I get a shot anywhere here in the gray, I'm good. That is good enough, right? I do not need to think above and beyond that and consider that, if I play some shots out here, I'm a bad person and I suck at this. That is not the case. Get away from the bullseye mentality. Think slightly about bigger targets when it comes to training for self-defense. Shorter distances. I think that we have a tendency to think we got to shoot like Jason Bourne. We got to be shooting at 25 meters or 15 meters or things like that. That's really just not the case. When it comes to self-defense, more than 80% of self-defense life-threatening encounters happen in less than 10 feet. 10 feet is nothing. That's a very short distance. So you might consider, if you're a novice, if you're starting out, start training at 10 feet. That's probably a good distance. And develop a certain amount of proficiency and muscle memory at 10 feet. And then maybe start moving the target out a little bit. A distance of 21 feet is a pretty large distance. So I think 21 feet is kind of that kind of barrier zone, or for me, I think that you're talking about a good shooter versus a really advanced shooter. Most of us train right around that distance between 15 and 21 feet, and I think that's a pretty good balance. Beyond 21 feet, not to say that you can't train that way or that it wouldn't be valuable, but you're starting to get to a point where we're getting into that level of probably unrealistic for handgun self-defense. And lastly, I would have you consider that you need to train and practice how to control the expenditure of your ammunition. You don't want to be in a situation in real life where you draw the weapon and you go through all the ammunition in the gun, because every time you go to the range and you train, you always shoot the gun until you run out of ammunition, and then you reload. Well, in real life, you're always going to do what you did in training. What that means is you're going to come up on the target and you're going to shoot without stopping to consider, is the threat stopped? Have I eliminated the threat? Do I have other attackers, other things I have to deal with? Right? Do I need to check before I keep shooting? So you have to somehow train and teach yourself to control the expenditure of ammunition, to not waste it all constantly, not just be in the habit of pulling the trigger until you run out of ammunition. Put a couple shots down range. Stop, pause, reevaluate, shoot a few more, and think of it that way. So don't just shoot to shoot. Really control the expenditure of ammunition. Those are some tips that are going to help you get the most out of the time you spend training for self-defense.